It is still morning, and I always like to start a little early so I can do some updates here and ask a few questions. And we're live broadcasting this to Facebook as well. And I thought I'd change my topic a bit today, and I'm going to deal with one race, one blood, talk about the book of Genesis, answer to racism and prejudice, probably because there's been a few news items about that sort of thing lately. And I thought, you know what, that'd be a good topic to deal with here, and it covers talking about the book of Genesis anyway. But just for interest, first of all, how many of you, this is your very first time at the Creation Museum? Okay, look at that. That just looks about just about everybody here. Well, that's great. All right, how many of you have been here before? Oh, still a number of you. That's good. How many of you have already been to the Ark? Okay, and how many are going to the Ark? There we are, look at that. It's going to blow you. I'll give you a few little pictures here. It'll blow your mind. You know, people using words like breathtaking, epic, unbelievable, can't describe it. When you get on the buses down there, and then you go up the hill, you go down the valley, and then you go up the hill, and when you see the Ark for the first time, listen to the gasps and the wows, and people don't realize how big Noah's Ark is. It's not that bathtub ark with giraffes sticking out the chimney that you see in so many children's books. And for those that have been there, you know that we have an exhibit dealing with that. I believe it's going to be one of the greatest Christian outreaches of our era of history. And how many of you are from outside of Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky? Put your hands up. Okay, so then I have to ask a question. Is there anybody at all here from Kentucky? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, the token Kentuckians today, 5. How about anyone from Ohio? A little better showing. Indiana. So that means the rest of you are from all across the nation then. So how many of you are staying at least one night, maybe even more, in a hotel in the area? Okay, look at all those hands. Well, that was great. You know, on Saturday, we had between the Ark and the Creation Museum almost 9,000 people who are in northern Kentucky, most of whom are outside of Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky. And you know what's interesting? You still have the news media, particularly some of the atheists and the secularists out there saying it's a disaster, nobody's coming. And I don't know why. I think they must think they try to discredit us or the museum or something like that. The Washington Post had an article today saying how, you know, attendance at the Creation Museum has been really bad the last few years. Actually, it's been absolutely phenomenal. And our biggest year was the first year, and then it goes down and up and down and up. It averages about 300,000 a year. Indications are right now it'll be probably up around 600,000-700,000 or more a year, particularly with the Ark opening, because most people want to go to both places. And really, they're two of the leading Christian-themed attractions in the world that stand unashamedly on the authority of God's word and proclaim the gospel. So I think the secularists don't like that. They don't like Christians getting their message out. So anyway, what other question do I have for you? Oh, anyone from a different country? And I don't mean places like California, I mean, or Texas, different country, yes. Switzerland. I can hear the accent. I don't have an accent. So Switzerland, okay. Any other countries? Yes. West Africa, Liberia. Were you down did I meet you down the Ark? There was somebody else I met from West Africa. No? Okay. So, yes, over there. Where are you from? Canada. The north. Yes, we get a lot of Canadians that come down here. Any Australians today, other than me? Any other Australians? We had some Australians down the Ark there. Any other countries? Yes? Germany. Great. We get people come from all over. I was down the Ark the other day, and there are people from China and Honduras and Uruguay and Spain. And in fact, I had to keep going until I met an American. There are people from all over the world. And then if you want an interesting exhibit, another exhibit I think is fascinating. You can see it in the Creation Museum parking lot. You see it in the Ark parking lot. Go around and look at all the license plates. And count up how many states you see. There are sometimes you'll get 30, 40 different states on one day. We even had license plates from Hawaii the other day, as well as Alaska, down there at the Ark. Well, Answers in Genesis and Apologetics Ministry, and we opened the Ark on July 7, actually. life-size Noah's Ark. For those that have been there, you'll recognize some of these photographs here. And then the inside exhibits, which are absolutely astounding. And just the Ark, it's so big. You know, here's the other interesting thing. The secularists, they go down and take pictures outside the Ark and show hardly anyone there, and they say nobody's there. You go inside the Ark, there's 4,000 people in there. And the thing is, it holds so many people, you just disappear in there. You can put 4,000 to 5,000 people in that Ark, and they just disappear. We're actually permitted by the exit stairs that are on the towers at the back to exit 10,000 people at one time. That's how big those exit stairs really are. And the exhibits are absolutely outstanding, phenomenal, world class. And if you look here too, you can see the picture here. This is Amzara's restaurant, 1,500-seat restaurant, which is a big restaurant. I found on the internet there's a 900-seat restaurant in Frankenmuth, Michigan, but I can't find anything bigger than that in America. This is 1,500 seats, and you see how it's dwarfed by the Ark. You realize how big the Ark is, and there's Amzara's restaurant. By the way, they built the bulk of that in 7 weeks, which some people will find hard to believe, but it actually happened. And then, of course, we're continuing to add things all the time, and we're going to be adding a nomad village on the right-hand side of the Ark very, very soon. At the back, we're starting building a theatre, 1,000-seat or so theatre. We're going to build in the restaurant at the top of the Ark, so you can come back and be a reservation-only restaurant where you can go and you can actually walk outside the Ark and be on the top of the Ark, and you walk outside along there. Hopefully that'll be ready by March, April next year. They'll be ready. We're also starting phase 2, which is a walled city. So there'll be just things added all the time. And I believe on Wednesday at the Ark, the zip lines open, and the camel rides and the donkey rides all open on Wednesday as well. So, okay, do you guys want to be the first in the universe to see something? Okay, other than half a dozen of us here. We are releasing a brand new commercial on television for the Ark. And because we wanted to show it as many times as possible, and we don't have zillions of dollars, we decided on a 15-second commercial. You know how quick 15 seconds is? How do you do a 15-second commercial and make people remember the Ark? Okay, keep in mind, most people Google these days, so you don't need to put a website address like arkencounter.com. As long as you've got the name there, they'll Google it. That's research shows the majority do that. I want to show you the commercial. It's going to be shown publicly for the first time during the Republican convention on Fox News. So we're advertising during Fox News. Because we thought a lot of people are going to be watching Fox at that time. And it's going to be on lots of other stations all across the nation, on different networks and so on. And so let's get ready. Okay. So you can't do a lot in 15 seconds, but let's see how they did. You ready?
People everywhere are talking about the Ark. Now open.
There you are. You know what I should do? I'm going to play it again, and I'm just going to show you how there are subtle things done that capture your eye and you don't even realize it. All right? For instance, you'll notice the leaf moves. You'll notice the stars at the top, there's a highlight runs through them. You'll notice the words down the bottom, a highlight runs through them. And if you look very carefully, your eye catches it actually. If you look very carefully, the photograph at the end, actually they made the water slightly move and the plants slightly move, so you think it's actually a video, but it's actually a photograph. So watch it again and you might pick up some of those things.
People everywhere are talking about the Ark. Now open.
So there you are. You saw that? You know what I might do too? Let me see if I can do this for you. I'll have to drag this across. But you saw those words, remarkable, landmark. Well, we have some billboards, 400 of them that are going up right now. I think there's already a couple, 200 to 300 already up. I'll show you, hang on, because I didn't have it in a slide, so I'll just drag it across for you. This is one of the billboards. Okay, you see that? You're going to see those billboards all across the nation. Isn't that a fantastic billboard? It really is. And so it connects with our commercial that has the word remarkable in it, right? So let me see. You want to see one more? Okay, see if I can show you another one. First of all, I have to get this over here. Okay, and then close it down for you. See, I didn't have it in a slide, so. Okay, and here is, now this one's not as spectacular as that one, but it still is a great billboard. Again, these all match with our commercial too. So that one there. So landmark, there it is. And it's got a family there looking at the Ark. So there you are. Now, some of you may have also heard that about 10 days ago, last Friday, a week before last Friday, I actually met Bill Nye down the Ark and spent 2 hours walking through the Ark. Now, originally it was to be just a private walkthrough, and he wanted his video crew to come. Then he told us what time he wanted to come. And obviously what he was doing, he wanted an audience, play to his audience and video, and he's doing a movie next year. So we said, okay, only if we can video it as well, which we did. And all these people, there were hundreds of people gathered around us and young people. So we'll release the whole 2 hours of that debate sometime in the near future. And what I'm doing right now is just taking excerpts from it. I thought I'd show you this one excerpt because you need to understand what these secularists are really saying and what they believe, and I want you to see how they react to questions. So this is just one little excerpt, and a lot of people have not seen this yet, so let's release this one. Okay.
You find these shock patterns and you find the minerals from Mars. So it is not crazy, it's extraordinary, but not crazy to suggest that Mars was hit with an impactor through what's generally called a Hohmann orbit, an orbit where it falls toward the sun but ends up on the Earth. You and I are descendants of Martians.
Okay, and that's not crazy. And that's not crazy? Is it crazy that you and I are descendants of Adam and Eve?
We are descendants from a common ancestor. I don't know
is it crazy that God made the first man and woman and we're descendants of them?
For me, there's no evidence of that.
So is that crazy?
But
I wouldn't use that word.
What would you say?
It's you're betraying your intellect. You're not using your head.
So you're saying it is crazy?
It's frustrating.
Which is more crazy, though?
But you're saying we're descendants of Martians, and that's not crazy?
I say it is not crazy. It's extraordinary, but not crazy.
Okay,
and we have a process by which we can prove that. That's what's so exciting.
Prove that we're Bill, I want you to do that for all these young people. Prove that we're descendants from Martians.
I can't prove that right now. I don't know where you were the last minute and a half.
I thought you said we could.
We want to send spacecraft there.
Okay.
We have a process by which we can make this discovery.
Okay.
And it could be on Europa. There might be something alive.
What if there is no discovery?
Well, that's also extraordinary. That makes us even more unusual in the universe.
Are you prepared to take, we have a book called the Bible that says it is the Word of God who made all things, who said, here's what happened in the past. Are you prepared to take that and consider it in regard to the evidence you see in the present?
So I claim, Mr. Ham, but I spent a lot of time on it. I read it twice. I followed the guys around on the maps. I decided that humans made the whole thing up.
There was 2.5 hours of that. Oh no, 2 hours of that. I tell you, it was stressful. But you'll be interested to see the rest of it. And I shared the gospel with him very clearly, prayed for him, and we had lots of other interesting conversations. So keep watching my Facebook. We'll be releasing various video clips. There's another one that I asked him, what happens when you die? And he said, when you die, you're done. And then I asked him, so what's the point of you doing anything you do and being against us if when you die, you're done? And you should hear his answers. Just shows you the hopelessness and the meaninglessness of atheism. So anyway, be praying for Bill Nye. But we'll be showing more of those clips. Just keep on my Facebook. Also, I wanted to mention, I just want to show you how I tell you, the media today, here's what I've come to recognize. I don't even want to read a newspaper about the news or even watch television news, because I know how many things they lie about us and say that are untrue and never call us and misreport and continue to promulgate urban myths and legends out there without checking the facts. They do that with us nearly all the time. How can I believe anything I see on the media? I mean, anytime you hear anything on the media, particularly the secular media, news items, or they're talking about someone or something, you have to immediately question it. You just have to. Because from our experience, they get things just wrong. They don't check their facts. And I'll give you a couple of examples here. Washington Post came out with an article this morning. And it's a hit article against the Ark, with the opening this summer of the Ark Encounter, built by fundamentalist Christian. Notice they always like to get their words in there. Fundamentalist Christian ministry in rural Kentucky. What are they trying to say there? You know, backward Kentucky or something? See, they've always got that agenda in there, with the help of state tax incentives. How many times do we have to tell the world no tax money was used, zero, zilch, what are some other words? Nada, I don't know, whatever. How many times do you have to tell no taxpayer money was used in building the Ark? None, zero, and yet they still promulgate these myths. It just really, anyway. Okay, financial documents released by Ark Encounter, because of with our bond issue, the for-profit company that the not-for-profit company uses to run its new attractions seemed to raise questions about the confidence. The firm lists more than 3 dozen risks to potential bondholders, including negative cash flow, adverse publicity, environmental regulations. First of all, number one, it's our supporters who purchased the bonds, right? Number two, by law, any bond offering, and there are thousands of them across America, any bond offering has to list all the risks. You have to come up with risks. You've got to list them all. It's sort of like when you advertise a drug on television. This drug will do this for you and this, and it'll help with this and this. And then they say, and by the way, if you take it, you could die, you could this, you could fall, you could get brain damage, your heart will stop, whatever. There's all these other things, because they're all the potential risks, but it's a great drug. See, every bond, you know what they're trying to do? Single us out as if only our bond offering has risks. Every bond offering has risks. You invest in the stock market, it has risks. The way they single out, because we're Christian, they single us out and make out it's some sinister thing. It really gets me. And then a study commissioned by and released by AOG boasts that their biblical attraction will receive a healthy 1.2 million to 2.2 million, actually it's 1.4 million, they didn't even get that right, to 2.2 million visitors annually. But an economic impact review by Hunden Strategic Partners, commissioned by the state of Kentucky, estimates that it's much less than that. It's going to be 640,000 and then settle near 400,000. Here's the interesting thing. When the government of Kentucky did their research as to whether we would have economic impact to receive this tourism tax incentive, which is a rebate on the sales tax we generate in our facility that kicks in after a year. So, you know, we have these people writing to newspapers, which they've done all last week, saying, I'm upset, I live in Kentucky, and my taxpayer money is being used to build the Ark. If you don't want any of your money to be used for the Ark, don't come. And then none will be used. If you don't pay a ticket to get in, none of your money will be used. How many times do we have to say that? Not only that, you know what Hunden did? They looked at a few other places and basically collated together and said, oh, we think this is what's going to happen. Do you know what our researchers did, America's research group, twice now? A general population study, primary research in America, where they actually call people, talk to them, record the conversations, do the statistical analysis. Primary research is very, very accurate. Hunden did no primary research. And so it's apples and oranges. You can't equate the Hunden report with what our researchers did twice, by the way. And then there's going to be a drop-off at the Ark, and it'll be a similar pattern to Ham's 27 million. We spent a lot more than that on it now. Creation Museum. They vigorously deny reports that attendance has fallen off. You can actually see in this room that attendance has way fallen off. Packed audience. People, I don't know where they get all this stuff from, and I'm not sure where Hunden even got their figures from, but this is the stuff that goes on every day. That's just one report in the Washington Post. You should read all the reports that come out every day and what the blog... See, you know, some of these atheists, as I mentioned, I mean, they go outside the Ark and they take a photograph. There's hardly any people there when there's 4,000 people inside. I mean, this is the sort of thing they do. That's why I've come to realize, man, you can't believe anything you read unless you check it out yourself and go to primary research. By the way, do you know how many reporters from the Washington Post called us to check their facts and called us to interview us? 0. Exactly, 0. So I actually offered an opinion piece to the Washington Post on the issue of race and racism. And they said they were interested, but then an editor was not interested. And one of the things that I believe they didn't like was the fact that I challenged President Obama. And I challenged him that he is saying the wrong things in regard to race, which he is. And I'll show you why here in a moment. You know, if our leaders started speaking correctly and using the right terminology and believed the right history, it would certainly make a big difference in this nation. And, you know, I was even listening to President Obama last night as he was talking about that really sad shooting down there in Louisiana. And then he says, God bless you and God bless America. I want to know what he means by God and God bless. That's what I'd like to know. What does he mean when he says God bless? Does he mean the God of the Bible? And then when you hear him and others talk about, you know, you'll be in our prayers, what does that mean? Who are they praying to? And what are they praying? What does that mean? See, I think we've got to start asking these questions. Whenever they use words like that, excuse me, what do you mean by God bless? Which God? What God are you talking about? And what does that actually mean? I don't think they have a clue. I don't think they know. It's just a saying, like, you're welcome, you know. And it's the same with, oh, you're in our prayers. What does that mean? We need to start challenging people in regard to this and then use it as an opportunity to witness to them. So I thought, because there's all sorts of issues of racism in this country, I thought today would be good to just go through and lay some basics in regard to the issue of races. Because, you know, many people talk about races. One of the questions we get is how the different races come about. Darwin, in his book on the origin of species, talks about races, and Darwin talked about the fact that there are different races of humans, and some are closer to ape-like creatures than others and so on, which in many ways has helped fuel racism. I'm not saying Darwin was racist or anything, but what I want to do is show you the only way to answer the question, and by the way, I don't see the church leading the charge in regard to answering the racism issue. You know why the church is not leading the charge? Because most of the church doesn't take Genesis as literal history. And we haven't taught generations of people how to defend their faith. Do you realize if you take that history in Genesis, as we do here at the Creation Museum, as we do at the Ark Encounter, if you take that history and build your worldview, you've immediately got an answer to the issues of racism and prejudice. It's all there, but you've got to believe the right history. You know, the Bible says that we're all descendants of Adam and Eve. If we're all descendants of one man and one woman, first of all, how many races of people are there? Only one. You know, science confirms that. There's only one race. What do you hear people like Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson and President Obama talking about? The races. The black race and the white race. People. For a start, we've got to get rid of that term races. It itself has prejudice connotations because of the way people view the term races, and we'll talk about that. But look, as we first start, when people say, well, you go back to Adam and Eve, yeah, well, you know, one of the most asked questions I get asked, I mean, it used to be the most asked question, where did Cain get his wife? Now the most asked question when people come to the Creation Museum is not where did Cain get his wife. Usually it's something like, where are the restrooms? That's what they want to know. It's the same down the Ark Encounter. Well, we're human, right? So, where did Cain get his wife? Well, let me ask this question. Can you marry your relation? Yes, no, probably only after counseling. You know why I asked that? The atheists were protesting the opening of the Ark on July 7, and one of the things they wanted to do, which they weren't allowed to because billboard companies refused to do it, they actually had a billboard proposal to put this up saying, celebrating 4,000 years of genocide and incest. 4,000 years of genocide and incest. Incest, because what? Because close relations married? Well, we'll talk about that in a moment. I see Vicky is standing there, and okay, you can do your announcement then. I forgot.
Good afternoon and welcome to today's presentation. Our speaker today is Ken Ham, and he is the founder, president, and CEO of Answers in Genesis, Creation Museum, and the Ark Encounter. And now at this time, I'd like to ask you to please silence your cell phones And I'd like to direct your attention to the emergency exits located to the front, to the left and right of the stage, along the left side of the wall. Now, if you'll please give your full attention to Ken Ham.
All right. Just to surprise you, I'm back. Anyway, all right, so yes, no, probably only after counseling. Okay, so people have the idea you can't marry your relative. When you get atheists accusing us of incest or believing in incest because 8 people got off an ark and then Ham, Shem, and Japheth and their wives gave rise to all the people on the earth today. That's incest, close relations, marrying. Wait a minute. First of all, from an evolutionary perspective, what do they believe? Man evolved from animals, and man mated with whom, with what, how many, how, whatever. And marriage is whatever you want to make it to be, and there's no such thing anyway. And they accuse us of a problem? Who do they think they are? That's ridiculous. And you see, think about it from this perspective. From this perspective, first of all, marriage is one man, one woman. Jesus, in Matthew 19, when asked about marriage, said, haven't you read, he which made them at the beginning made them male and female, Genesis 1:27. By the way, we do have male and female bathrooms here and at the Ark for that reason. I just want you to know that. Made them male and female, and said, for this cause shall a man leave his father and mother and cleave unto his wife, and there'll be one flesh, quoting from Genesis, where what happened? God made Adam from dust. He brought the animals to him to name. He saw that he was all alone. There was none like him. Only he was made in the image of God. He didn't look at a female chimp and say she's close enough or anything like that. I could date her. So God put him to sleep, and from his side made a woman, and the first recorded words of Adam were, this is bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. Jesus quotes from that. You know what Jesus is saying? Marriage is a man and a woman because God invented marriage in Genesis, where we read that he made man from dust, woman from his side, male and female. There's no other option. That's what marriage is, a man and a woman. If you take God at his word. Somebody needs to tell the Supreme Court justices that, and also the President of the United States, and let them know, you people didn't invent marriage, God did. It's important to understand. Well, the Bible says that Adam was the first man, Eve was given that name, she was the mother of all the living. Acts 17 says God made from one blood, because we're all one race, one blood, all nations of men for to dwell on the face of the earth. So if you have one man, one woman, where did Cain get his wife? Because the Bible says it was Cain and Abel and Seth. Actually, Genesis 5:4 says Adam had sons and daughters. So originally, brothers had to marry who? Sister. Now, as soon as I say it, people say, oh, well, wait a minute, you're not allowed to marry a relative? I got news for you. If you don't marry a relative, you don't marry a human, then you have a different problem. Right? When you get married, you marry your relative. The woman I married, she's my relative, because we all go back to Adam and Eve. Everyone's related. Everyone in this room is related. This is just one big, great family get-together here at the Creation Museum today. Now, you don't marry a close relative today, though. Why is that? Think about, when was the first time God said to the Israelites no longer should close relations marry? It wasn't until the time of Moses in Leviticus 18. Remember, Abraham was married to his half-sister, and that wasn't a problem. So what's the issue? The issue is, when God made Adam and Eve, they were perfect, but they sinned. As a result of sin, now there are mutations. Now what happens when you copy genes from one generation to the next? There are mutations, copying mistakes, and they add up, and they progressively get more and more and more and more and more until 6,000 years later, people, we have a lot of mistakes on our genes. The genetic load is extensive. I mean, look around the room. I can just see them staring at me here. And see, here's the problem. The problem is this. The problem is, if you marry someone, if brother and sister were to marry today, it's more likely you've got the same mistakes inherited from your parents. And so when sperm fertilizes egg and those mistakes get together, they can reinforce problems in the offspring, increase likelihood of all sorts of problems. That's why it's better to marry someone further away in relationship. So where you have a mistake, the other one has a good gene that'll mask the bad gene. You get the idea? But you see, the further back you go in history, the less of a problem that is. Adam and Eve, their genes were perfect. Their children would have had relatively few mistakes. There was no problem with brother and sister marrying originally, provided it's one man for one woman, because that's what marriage is all about. But you see, as time goes on, then God to the Israelites said no longer for close relations to marry, and there's no need today anyway because there's so many people. Plus, because of sin and degeneration, it's a major problem. By the way, you know the word incest wasn't even invented until about the 14th century or so. Actually, the word incest we use today encompasses a whole range of things, some of which have always been immoral, but not brother and sister marriage. In the context of understanding biblical history, you know, I was talking about this on radio once, and a guy called up and said, I'm an atheist, and if you believe brothers and sisters married, that's immoral. First thing I said, you're an atheist. You can't use the word immoral, right? And then, you know, and what do you base your standards, right? And then secondly, what do you believe? Man evolved from animals, and man is part human and part whatever, and they married who? Or no, there's no such thing as marriage. That's right, you're an atheist, and who mated with who and what and whatever, and it doesn't matter? Come on. You know, so, hey, it's easy to answer these questions. Isn't it exciting answering these questions? Do you realize generations of our kids have been brought up in churches where they haven't been given these answers? And that's one of the reasons why they say, how can you trust the Bible? That's why here at the Creation Museum and the Ark Encounter, you will see lots of questions that are answered. So, okay, we can understand where Cain got his wife. Then people say, well, okay, well, how do you explain all the different races of people? That's how they ask me, races of people. Well, as I said, there aren't any different races. There's only one race, and I want to show you that even scientifically, genetically, we've confirmed that. But really to understand how you get all the differences in humans that you see all across the earth, you've got to have a little basic course in genetics. So we're going to do some basic genetics first of all. Sorry about that, but we are. But I like to make it fun so that we enjoy studying genetics, even if you've never studied it. Hey, if you're married and had kids, you studied genetics anyway. So, all right. In Genesis 1, it says that God made the animals and plants after his kind, after their kind. The word kind, the Hebrew word mean, that sometimes is translated sort or kind. What does that mean? See, when I debated Bill Nye believes, in fact, I've got another video quote we'll put up in a day or two, where I said, Bill, if you believe in evolution, we're not just related to animals, we're related to plants too, because you believe in one tree of life, right? Yes, we're related to plants. I said, that means you're related to a banana. And he actually says, yes, we're related to bananas. So I want him to understand that. We're descendants of Martians and related to bananas. It's getting a little bit more interesting as we go on here, because he believes in one tree of life. You know what the Bible makes clear? There's separate trees. There's the dog tree, the cat tree, the elephant tree. You can have lots of species of dogs, but dogs remain what? Dogs. Now, I did a live Facebook post this morning on something I never heard about this, so I thought I'll have some fun with this, and I got our social media team together. I said, tell me what this is all about. It's called Pokemon or something, whatever it is. And anyway, so we're going through the museum and finding all these things, and I actually had one of the guys dress up in a dinosaur costume who jumped out, and I said, look, a Pokemonosaur, I found one. There it is right there. So I had fun. You can go and see the Facebook post. I just decided to have a bit of fun with all of this. I have no idea I still don't even understand what it's all about. Some sort of game or something, they reckon. And then on part of the game, it actually says evolve, and it has this bird there, and we pressed evolve, and it turned into a bird. And I thought, well, that's good. At least it does that. Birds remain birds, even though it was a stronger bird. So that's all right. So anyway, but the point is, in our classification system, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species, that's man's system. So when the Hebrew word mean is translated sort of kind, what does it mean? We would say in most instances, not all, but in most, it represents the family level of classification. Down the Ark, there's an exhibit where we talk about how many kinds were needed on the Ark, because he didn't take all the species. You'll hear, young people hear all the time, these secularists saying he needed millions of species on the Ark. What a load of nonsense. It was only the land animals and it wasn't species. That's man's term. God says kind. For instance, take dogs. There's only one dog family and different genera and different species. We'd say one dog kind. Only one cat family, we'd say one cat kind. You see, what our researchers have done, we've got lots of research papers published on this in a technical journal called the Answers Research Journal on our website. They say, well, look, we found that this dog breeds with this one, and this species with this one, and this species with this one, and they go all around the world and document all that. And then they say, now this one didn't breed with this one, but you can connect it back through all these to this one. They're all the one kind. You get the idea? They've done that sort of research, meticulous research with all the different kinds of land animals. And at the Ark, we even overestimate how many kinds are on the Ark, way overestimate to show you, even with way overestimating, there's plenty of room on the Ark. If you take dogs, secular world, Canada is a diverse group of 34 species. You know, you've got dingoes and coyotes and jackals and fennec and foxes and so on. And then the secular world says this: based on the genetic, morphological and behavioral data, it's clear that domestic dogs originate from the wolf. So something like that gave rise to you domestic dogs, including that. Now, people say, how could that give rise to that, or that, or that? Isn't that evolution? It's not evolution, because evolution is really an onward, upward process with gain of information. Actually, when you understand what's happening in dogs, there's actually a loss of information. And in fact, when you get to a poodle, it's dramatic, a dramatic loss of information. Okay? Which is the opposite of an evolutionary process, by the way. So, we don't know how many dogs God made originally. Let's say he made 2 dogs and they got married and had kids, they got married and had kids, they got married and had kids, and we end up with lots of dogs, okay? Sort of like the average homeschool family today. Now, so what happens? All right, so in genetics, you know, we have genes, big A, big B, little b, big C, little c, because it's much more complicated, and there's millions of these. I mean, the amount of information in the genes of organisms across the earth, it's just absolutely dramatic. It's so mind-boggling. But we're just going to select out these, and we're going to use a very basic concept, sort of big picture perspective, even though it's much more complicated and technical than this. But this is the overview. This is really gives you an essence of what's happening. So the capital letters represent dominant genes, little letters recessive genes. So, okay, from male and female dog, you can get 2 A's, 2 B's, 2 C's, all capital letters, and then you can get all these other combinations. Now, I like to use this one, the little A's, little B's, little C's. I say that to me represents, you know, your purebred dogs, like a poodle. When they mean purebred, what do they mean? What do they mean is, how do we get our domestic varieties in our domestic species? Well, you know, you say, oh, look, here's a dog with a short nose and a dog with a short nose. Let's breed that together so any of the long nose genes are not in the next offspring. And so we just get short nose genes. You get the idea? So you know what they do? They eliminate information, which is why, if any of you have those purebred sort of dogs like poodles, not only have you eliminated information, but because of sin, remember that? We accumulate and actually add, if you like, concentrate mistakes. So really, they're degenerate mutants, is what they really are. Sorry about that. Now, so if this is a poodle and you breed a poodle with a poodle, what are you going to get? Poodle. You can't get back to the original dogs. See, I want you to look at this. This offspring here, does it have more information or less information than the parents? It's got less variability. You know why? It no longer has the little A's, little B's, little C's. This no longer has the big A's, big B's, big C's. You get the idea? So if you breed poodles with poodles, that's all you're going to get, because you don't have all the information in there. And that's the thing that we need to understand. Now, the number of atoms in the known universe is said to be 10 to the 80th power. If you took one man and one woman from this audience, how many children could you have potentially without having the same combination of information from the genes that you have right now? If you took one man and one woman, how many children could you have without having any with the same combination of information? That's how many children you could have. 10 to the 2017th power compared to 10 to the 80th power. People, do you realize? Here's what many people don't get. God put that sort of variability, all this information in the dog kind, the cat kind, the elephant kind. See, if you don't understand that, evolutionists are secularists. You know what it is? Most people don't think. Most people don't study. They don't check things out, just like they read the newspaper and believe everything they read. They don't check it out. And what happens? They're easily convinced in evolution. Oh, look, Darwin found different species of finches. That's evolution. What are they? Finches. What were they? Finches. What will they be? Finches. Isn't that evolution? It's finches. That's all it is. And see, you've got to understand something. Even looking at those different finches Darwin found, that's nothing compared to the variability in that same kind. Now, 2 of each kind gets on Noah's Ark. 7 of some, but 2 of the unclean. You only needed 2 dogs on the ark. They come off the ark, and as they come off the ark, what happens? They increase in number again. They're not going to stay together. They split up and spread to different places on the earth. And what happens? You get different combinations of genes that end up surviving for whatever reasons in different groups, and you get your different species. Actually, one of our scientists, PhD scientist, Dr. Nathaniel Jensen, if you want the technical information, go to our Answers Research Journal. It's on our website. It's free. He's just written a very, very detailed technical paper showing you how such speciation we now can show genetically can happen very rapidly, much more rapidly than what people think. Even striping in zebras, it can be as simple as turning on and off a gene for the next generation. So it's much more different than what many people have the idea of. But to help us understand this, what's called natural selection speciation, which is all used as a part of evolution, and students are taught this in their public schools. Natural selection, speciation, adaptation. Let me show you what's really going on. Here are 2 dogs that go on Noah's Ark. They have an S gene and an L gene. S for short hair, L for long hair. Get the idea? Now, so from that, if they have an offspring that inherits the 2 S genes, it's going to have short hair. Aha, look, it's got something new. This is what the secularists always say to the students. Look, you get something new, short hair. New, that's evolution. Actually, if you look at that dog with short hair, it's got less information than the parents because it no longer has the L gene. It got something new, but it's got less information. You see that? Then one with the same, and then, oh, look, new, it's got long hair. You know what's new? The combination, not the information. See, for evolution, you've got to add new information that never was there. But that's what you never see, ever. Now, imagine they get off Noah's Ark, start to increase in number, and some head towards a cold climate. In a cold climate, what do you find? Those with short hair and medium hair get cold. They die. And now all you end up with is dogs with short hair, right? So imagine those with L genes, what happens? So we go up to, sorry, let me go back to that. So now you end up with only dogs with L genes because all the short genes are gone, okay? Now imagine those same dogs go towards a hot climate. In a hot climate, those with long hair and medium hair overheat now and they die. And now you only end up with dogs with what? S genes. So what's new? A new combination of already existing information that's less variability than the parents. That's the opposite of evolution. Natural selection involves loss of information, maintenance of information, okay, new combinations of information, but all the opposite of an evolutionary process that requires brand new information added into the genes, which you never see. And so over time, as they spread out, what they call natural selection, adaptation, and speciation just is the fact that you got a single kind that ends up forming lots of different species because of the incredible genetic potential that's there, and depending on which one mates with which and which one survives and which characteristics survive better in an area, and there's probably a lot more going on genetically than what people understand, which we're starting to find out as well, and the process can happen much more rapidly than we thought. And so you see, that's why with Bill Nye I said, you believe in one tree, we believe in lots of branches within lots of different trees. And see what the evolutionists do, they see all these changes like in dogs or finches or whatever, and they say, aha, those changes all add up to one tree. And we say, no, those changes are only changes within a tree. There's lots of different trees. So you see, the science of genetics confirms the Bible's biology in Genesis. And then you realize Noah didn't need anywhere near the number of animals on the ark we think. He just needed the representative kinds that gave rise to the species afterwards. You know what some people actually say? That we believe in evolution because of that. What? How absurd can you get? They say, oh, they believe in different species, that's evolution. You know why? Because in the public schools, students are taught that speciation is evolution. People, evolution requires brand new information. If you're going to change a reptile into a reptile doesn't have the information on how to make a feather, so you've got to have the information on how to make a feather added into the genes, which is what you don't see. Different combinations of information that were already there is the opposite of evolution. So speciation has nothing to do with evolution. And I could summarize it this way. Here we have, the dog kind. Over time, the jar of jelly beans there represents the amount of variability and information in the dog kind. Over time, you get less and less variability or information, and eventually, you're going to end up with hardly any at all in that sense. And by the way, I can't stand cats at all, so they're only half a jelly bean. And so that helps us answer the question, how could Noah get the animals on the ark? Now, you say, what on earth has this got to do with the origin of so-called races and so on? Okay, now we're going to apply that to the humankind. When you look at the humankind, one of the things that you notice, there are distinct groups that you can say that there's an American Indian, and he's an Australian Aborigine, and an Eskimo, and so it goes on. We've got all these distinct groups. Understanding what we just did with dogs, what would have to happen if you have a human population to get all these distinct groups that have distinctive characteristics? Something would have to happen in the population to split them up and take them away from each other and isolate them from each other. Can anyone think of anything in biblical history? Is there anything at all that could do that? The Bible makes it very clear, the Tower of Babel. God gave different languages because of their rebellion again, confused their languages, and what happens? You get people moving away from each other, developing distinct cultural aspects. They have distinct features in a way. They're all still our relatives. They all go back to Noah and back to Adam. But that's what, and it's easy to understand from a genetics perspective. When Darwin wrote his book on the origin of species by means of natural selection, and then the rest of it says the preservation of favored races in the struggle for life, people say, yeah, but he was just talking about animals. Right at the end of the book, he said this: in the distant future, light will be thrown on the origin of man in his history. All along, he intended to apply the same principles to humans, which he did when about 12 years later he published the book, The Descent of Man. Now, I could show you some quotes from The Descent of Man. They're all very convoluted and so on, and you have to sort of read a whole page to really understand it. But basically, Darwin does say in The Descent of Man that there's these different races, and some are closely related to the apes more than others. He puts the Australian Aborigines back closer to the apes than people with light skin, for instance. Yeah, you can imagine what that does to people's thinking when you do that. In fact, he talked about lower races and higher races. The late Stephen Jay Gould from Harvard University, ardent evolutionist, said this: biological arguments for racism may have been common before 1850. In other words, evolution is not the cause of racism. You know what the cause of racism is, by the way? It's the same cause of abortion and gay marriage and murder. It's a three-letter word. What's the cause? Sin, exactly. Sin is the cause of racism. Biological arguments for racism may have been common before 1850, but they increased by orders of magnitude following the acceptance of evolutionary theory. In 1924, there was a New York Tribune newspaper published in America that said the missing links were found in Australia, the Australian Aborigines. It is a fact of history that there were scientists from England and Germany who paid people to go to Australia to hunt down the Aborigines. They actually paid property owners, went on their property, they herded the Aborigines into swamps, killed them, or herded them over cliffs, and they had instructions on how to skin them and get their skulls for specimens for museums around the world, for all in the name of evolution. It's interesting, President Obama was over in Ethiopia in 2015. And I tell you, it is so, this is a sad when our leaders are using evolutionary ideas and then think that they're confronting racism. Because he was talking about Lucy, which is in a museum, supposedly one of our great ancestors. And here's President Obama talking about Lucy. Ethiopians are an ancient people in an ancient land. We honor Ethiopia as the birthplace of humankind. I got news for you. Ethiopia is not the birthplace of humankind. God made the first two people and put them in the Garden of Eden. And the whole world's been destroyed by a flood, and Ethiopia didn't exist before the flood. And neither did Australia or America. We honor Ethiopia as a birthplace of humankind. In fact, I just met Lucy, our oldest ancestor. Okay, you've got the President of the United States saying that some ape is our oldest ancestor, and not even every evolutionist agrees with that. They now put her off to the side rather than actual ancestor. As your great poet laureate wrote, here is the land where the first harmony in the rainbow was born. Here's the root of the genesis of life. The human family was first planted here. The President of the United States, oh, people, isn't it wonderful? Your ancestor was an ape. You're related to apes. Bill Nye takes it further. And bananas. And you're a descendant of Martians. You're a descendant of Martians, you're related to a banana, and you're related to an ape. You know, one of the things I said to Bill Nye, we'll put this video clip up too. Hey, Bill, we're just all animals. And when you die, you're done, as you said. Why shouldn't these young people decide to jump off a cliff and get over and done with right now? Oh, because they might make some great advancements for the future. What's the point if they make that? When they die, they're done. They won't remember they're ever here. What's the point? And you tell generations of kids, we're just animals. Then get rid of spare cats, get rid of spare kids. What's the difference? Animals? Males, females, do whatever, with whomever, what? You know, it's interesting, I often see secularists who say, try to justify homosexuality or something like that on the basis of what they observed in certain animals. Okay, what about the animals that eat their young? What about that? You see, they don't understand we live in a fallen world. It's affected the whole of creation. The whole of creation, the animals, everything grown because of sin. Our sin. You know, it's sad, but it's a fact of history, that back in the, about the time of the Scopes trial, there was a biology textbook used in the public schools in America. This is one of the main biology textbooks by Hunter, and it actually said this. Here's a quote from the textbook. There's a picture of the textbook, Civic Biology, used in the public schools. At the present time, there exist upon Earth 5 races, the highest type of all, the Caucasians, represented by the civilized white inhabitants of Europe and America. And we wonder why there's still racism and prejudice and problems in our culture when the public schools were teaching that the Caucasians were the highest race. And you know where that came from? It really is a product of what Darwin was teaching. And you see, that's why I challenge people, we need to get rid of the term races. Because it used to be, when you used the term race, you talked about an ethnic group, you know, a cultural group, you know, the English race or the Irish race. But because of the influence of Darwin, people have this idea of higher races and primitive races, you know, lower races. And that's why I suggest to you, let's get rid of that idea of races, that humans are all separate, and let's talk about there's one race but different people groups. Do you know what's interesting? The secular world, the scientists who understand genetics actually advocate not using the term races. That's why I challenge President Obama, Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson, stop using the term races. It divides. And because of the evolutionary influence. Journal of Counseling and Development, 1998. Evidence continues to collect the term race is meaningless, used to point out differences in people that are not definitive. You know, when I went to school, I was taught the main racial groups are Caucasoid, Mongoloid, Negroid, Australoid. Where'd they get that from? It's actually based on evolutionary ideas. It's not based on what I would call real observational science. When the Human Genome Project back in the year 2000 put together and drafted the entire sequence of the human genome, you know what they said to the world? It was in New York Times had it. I mean, it was in papers all over the world. They unanimously declared there's only one race, the human race. Wow, who would have ever thought of that? One race? So what do we hear over and over again? Races, and there's different races, and there's the black race and the white race. People, the scientists know that there's only one race of humans. In this particular journal here, Nature Genetics, a scientific journal, evolutionary journal, humans vary only slightly at the DNA level, and only a small proportion of that variation separates continental populations or people groups. The differences genetically in all humans on the outside is pretty small. Here is the biological problem with race. This is from the American biology teacher in 2011. The genetic variation within each of the various ethnic groups of Homo sapiens is greater than that between the ethnic groups. Do you realize what they're saying? What were once classed as separate races, the variation within each group is greater genetically than the genetic variation between the groups. What does that mean? It means the whole concept of race is meaningless. And in fact, The National Centre for Scientific Research here in France, again published in Nature Genetics. The genes that explain the phenotypic differences, the outside differences like hair colour and so on, skin shade, between populations only represents a tiny part of our genome, confirming once again the concept of race from a genetic standpoint has been abolished. This is a secular world. Or American biology teacher, 2011, all humans are one race, Homo sapiens. There is absolutely no genetic or evolutionary justification for racial categories of humans. And you know, it was interesting to read in the New York Times in regard to the Human Genome Project in the year 2000, the criteria that people use for race are based entirely on external features we are programmed to recognize. If we're really honest about it in America, we're programmed to look at our skin and the shade of our skin. And we're programmed to look at black people as different to white people, when I'm going to tell you there really are truly no black people and there really are truly no white people. Because again, when you understand the genetics, and the secular scientific world knows this, we are different shades but not different colours. For instance, there's a pigment, the main pigment is melanin, a couple of different forms of melanin, and it gets sort of complicated, and there's some other pigments, but the main pigment is melanin, which is a brown pigment. If you use, and there's more genes than just these four, but if you use big A, big B, little b for the amount of melanin, if you have a lot of melanin, you can be very dark. You can even get to what they call black, but if you research it carefully, they say, but it's not truly black. It's brown, very dark brown. Or you can get to what they call white, which is not white, it's light brown. See, people look at me and say, but you're a white person. I do not want to be a white person right now. Okay. This is white. If I look like that, you'd be calling 911. What is your emergency? There is a white person talking to us. He needs help. Now, think about this. What shade, not what color, what shade was Adam and Eve's skin? See, we should be using the word shade, not color. We need to talk about people groups, not races. Do you realize that every human being, and unless you have the problem of albinism, which is a problem, but every human being is a colored person. This room is full of colored people because every one of you in this room is a colored person. If you're not, you have a problem. Everyone's related to everyone else. People, if we started talking the right way, and it affects how you view things. For instance, I had a man come up to me at one of the programs in Florida, very dark skin. So he wasn't black, he was a dark shade person, okay? And he came up on stage and he said, so we're all the same skin color? Yep. There's no real black people or white people? No, we're all the same color, different shades. Huh. I voted for President Obama because he was black. Now you're telling me that was a stupid reason to vote for someone. Yeah, it is a stupid reason to vote for someone. And you know, I said to the audience, I said, you shouldn't vote for someone because they're so-called black or white or Republican or Democrat or independent. You know what we need to do as Christians? Compare what they believe against the absolute authority of the Word of God and be salt and light. And by the way, nobody's going to measure up perfectly. And some will fall far short, but we want to be salt and light, so we measure accordingly and do our best to be the influence in the culture to maintain our religious freedoms and so on. And then I was at another church, and there was a man sitting with his wife. The man had really dark skin. People call him a black person. No, he's a dark shade person. Sitting beside a woman who was his wife who had very light skin. Oh, do you know what people in America call that? That's an interracial marriage. That's a biracial couple. They have biracial children. They got biracial children. Well, first of all, how can that be an interracial marriage when there's only one race? There's no such thing as interracial marriage from a biblical perspective, from a biological perspective. From a spiritual perspective, there is. The saved race and the unsaved race, we should not mix in marriage. But that's the spiritual races. It was interesting. The man and his wife were sitting beside the pastor, and he turned to the pastor and he said, "This is great. I'm just pleased to know I'm not married to a white woman." And then if you remember that little chorus we used to use, many of us learned at Sunday school, particularly the older generation, Jesus loves the little children, all the children of the world, red and yellow, black and white. People, that is just plain wrong. That's teaching ideas that are not true. Here's what I think we should be teaching. Jesus loves little children, all the children of the world. Shades are brown from dark to light. All are precious in his sight. Now that would get across the right message, wouldn't it? Now you see, so what were Adam and Eve? If they had all little A's and little B's and were what people call white, which is light shade, then the whole world would be like that. But if Adam and Eve had all big A's and big B's, a lot of melanin, then the whole world would be like that. But that lacks the genetic variability we see. So it makes much more sense to say Adam and Eve had a mixture of genes that God gave them. They were in the middle, and their children could have been dark through to light in one generation. They could have been like that. That's why you will notice when you go to the Ark, when you look at Noah's family, you see all different shades, because it's representing the genetic variability that was there. And you know, the secular world know this. National Geographic, back in 2002, had a picture of students lined up from Washington International Primary School, and they lined them all up to show everyone from light to dark, but they're all the same skin color. Look what they say. With the effects of human migrations and cultural habits, people in one place can show tremendous variation in skin tone, shade, not color, like students from Washington International Primary School. You see, this person here would have more like analogous to my little A's and little B's, so if she married, her kids would be like that. This person more analogous to big A's and big B's, she married her kids like that. But these here, they're more like the middle brown, sort of a mixture of genes, big A, big B, little b, so their kids would be like this one all through to this one. You get the idea? Now it's much more complicated than that, and there are sex-linked genes and all sorts of differences, but the point is you get the basic principles. Very easy to understand. Here are twins from Australia, twins from England, another group of twins. Here was a later picture of them right there. And here are more twins. There's a number of these around the world. They're actual twins, dark and light twins. Why? Because there was a mixture of genes with the parents, and some got genes for a lot of melanin, some got genes for not as much melanin. And see, because of the Tower of Babel, if you end up with people that only have big A's and big B's, on their own, that's all they're going to produce, dark-skinned people. If you end up with people with only little A's and little B's, on their own, they're only going to produce what? Light-skinned people. Poodles, on their own, only produce what? Poodles, because they lack the genetic variability. You get the idea? So these would have to marry back with these to get the original, you get all the original genes back in there to get the variability that God put in there in the first place. The same for eye shape. One of the reasons for different eye shape, the amount of fat in your eyelid. It's just the genes giving you a different amount of fat, and you can get the almond eye shape. But as ABC News said back in 1998, what the facts show is there are differences among us, but they stem from culture, not race. And people, you know what the answer to racism is? It's very simple. If you believe the true history of the world, as the Bible gives us, that we all go back to Adam and Eve, we're all one race, we're all equal before God. It does not matter who we are. We're all equal before God. We all have the same problem, sin, and we all need the same solution, Jesus Christ. And every one of us needs to judge what we believe and say and our behavior against the absolute authority of the Word of God. That is the only solution to racism. And the solution is not to say, look how bad these people were in the past and look what they did that was wrong. Yeah, you mean we're perfect? We're all sinners. And people, we shouldn't be looking at the past. We should be looking at who we are before a holy God. That's who we should be looking at. But you know what the trouble is? We've taken generations of kids through an education system, thrown the Bible out, taught them they're all related to bananas and animals and could be descendants of Martians. And then we wonder why they don't have a basis for right and wrong, a basis for marriage being a man and a woman. And you know, when we start to apply this, as I did just before, as I said, even things like interracial marriage, there's no such thing as interracial marriage. You know, I have people telling me, oh, these people, that's an interracial marriage, and look at all their biracial children. I wish Christians would stop talking like that. Because we're trying to make out that they're different. They're not. Little differences on the outside, that's all. We're all family, we're all related. And if we've thought like that, we need to repent before a holy God. We even need to go and apologize to people for which we may have said things. You know, according to God's word, there's only one biological race. But it's the spiritual things that are important here. It Don't be unequally yoked together with unbelievers. What fellowship has righteousness with lawlessness? What communion is light with darkness? It's not talking about light and dark skin. And you apply this across the board. When you apply it to marriage, think about this. Which impending marriage does God counsel against in his word clearly? Does he counsel against A, non-Christian and non-Christian? Does he counsel against B, Christian and Christian? Does he counsel against C, non-Christian and Christian? Which one does God clearly counsel against? The answer is C. Biological fact, all humans belong to one race. Spiritual fact, all humans are divided into two races. What is the difference between the two spiritual races? The direction in which they are racing. There's the broad way and the narrow way. By the way, mums and dads, the narrow way is in the world, it's in the broad way. And the broad way is trying to sweep your kids in this direction. It takes a lot of hard work and training to get them in the right direction, which means teaching them answers like this. The interracial marriage that God's word clearly speaks against is a marriage between the spiritual races. And you know, I've seen parents in America are more concerned their son or daughter not marry someone they think is from a different biological race when there's no such thing, instead of are they of the same spiritual race, which is what marriage is all about. I'll give you an example. Think of Rahab, the harlot, Jericho, presumably a descendant of Ham, Canaanite. You know, in the Bible, the Israelites were told, do not marry the Canaanites. I was told that more than once. And yet Rahab seems to be the same person in the lineage leading to Jesus. How could that be? Because she stopped being a Canaanite spiritually and became an Israelite spiritually. Because once she believes in the true God, she was free to marry an Israelite. It wasn't a biological difference for the reason they couldn't marry. It was a spiritual difference. And people, what a lesson for us. You could look at Ruth the Moabite, another example. And you know what my challenge to us is this? People, the genetics that's reflected on the outside, even the secular world says it's minor. They're minor variations. We're programmed to think they're major. And a lot of that programming is because of influences of people like Darwin and the evolutionary ideas that we have got to stop and start thinking biblically as a people. We've got to stop looking on the outside. You know, God gives us a lesson on that. Remember when Samuel came to anoint the king and he didn't know it was David? He didn't know it was David. And so he looked at one of David's brothers, and you can imagine, you know, put in a common vernacular, wow, look how strong and handsome he is. He's obviously the football star at the school. I can see why God would choose him to be king. But do you remember what happened? The Lord said to Samuel, do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him. The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. The next time somebody walks into your church or wherever you are, and you see they have a different shade of skin to you, or different shape eye, or different sorts of earlobes, or whatever it is, you know what we've got to try to stop doing, looking on the outside? Do they need my help? Do they need my love? Do they need the Lord? Because they're my relative. There are places in Cincinnati you could drive down a street and probably see a drug deal on the street. You know, now if you're doing that, I wouldn't encourage you to say, well, I need to stop, go witness to them. You might not have a car when you come back. In fact, you might not come back. But see, what a difference it makes when you say, they're my relatives. They're my relatives, and they're probably going to be in a Christless eternity, most likely. Maybe I can help an inner city mission, my church that reaches these people, so I can reach them with the gospel. What can I do to help them, to help my relatives, my family? Another application. A Christian girl, she's going to school and she says, oh, I like that guy. He's the football star. Wow, I wish he'd ask me to the prom or something. I wish he'd take me out. You know what, young lady? The most important thing is, it's not the outside. It's does he love the Lord with all his heart and all his soul and all his mind. It's the inside that matters. Or imagine a guy who looks at a girl, a Christian guy, looks at a girl, oh, she's so pretty. Oh, she's so attractive. Just the right color hair, right shade of melanin. wow, I'd like to ask her out. You know what, young man? Does she love the Lord with all her heart and all her soul and all her mind? It is not the outside that matters. It's the inside. And let me tell the guys something. This is very important for the guys to know. Let me tell you something. This will be a great revelation to you. The outside changes with time. Look at the mother and you'll understand exactly what I'm saying. Now I'm in trouble, aren't I? You know, sometimes my wife is with me, and when I travel and speak on these topics, and when I've spoken on this topic, you know, she's sitting there in the front, and I say, look at my wife. I remember when she was 17 and gorgeous and beautiful, and now over 40-odd years later, I look at her, and she's more beautiful than ever. See, I know the right thing to say. But you know what? If you fall in love, you can fall out of love. But if you choose to love and make that commitment before the Lord, that's what it's all about. And I can honestly say I love my wife. We love each other more than we ever have because we committed before the Lord. And it's the inside that matters, not the outside. You know, I could talk about these things for a long time. And I wanted to show you, I do all sorts of talks, and I have a series that deals with the whole foundations in Genesis, so all their doctrines are based in Genesis. You know the sad thing? Most churches have ignored the book of Genesis. Most pastors, not all, but most pastors, Christian leaders won't deal with Genesis, too controversial, whatever. People, the reason that the church is not leading the way in regard to issues like race and prejudice and so on has answers, because if you don't start with the book of Genesis and that history concerning creation, corruption, catastrophe, confusion, you will not have a foundation for your worldview. You won't have answers. God's given us the history to have the worldview, to have the answers. But you've got to start at the beginning in God's word. The gospel starts at the beginning. Why do you think God has Genesis first? Because do you realize Genesis 1 to 11 is the foundational history for the gospel, for our worldview, for marriage, for everything? Do you realize that? Well, before we close here, in a moment I'll be out there in the lobby if you want to come and say hi. And let me just mention to you just a few things, because we really want to equip you. If you want to get on our newsletter, email newsletter, keep up to date with our resources, what we're doing, the Ark, the museum, then fill that out and we'll give you a free DVD of my testimony that was given at a church a number of years ago. We have some specials for you. Our pocket guides, and are normally $6 each, cover a whole range of topics that kids need answers for and adults need answers for, and let you have them for $1 each. This is one of my favorite witnessing books, Begin. Because a lot of times people start in the New Testament to preach the gospel. The problem is the gospel starts in Genesis. And if you don't understand sin and you don't understand why death is in the world, you will not understand why Jesus died on the cross. It blows my mind the number of Christians that say you don't need Genesis, just tell people about Jesus. You cannot understand the message of Jesus without Genesis. Besides, the message of Jesus is preached the first time in Genesis 3:15 and Genesis 3:21. You look it up. And if you don't understand the origin of sin, how can you tell people they need Jesus? And so we have this witnessing book where we have Genesis 1 to 11, and then Exodus 20, the law, the book of John, the life of Christ, the book of Romans, the gospel in detail, last 2 chapters of Revelation, new heavens and new earth. We have a summary of the Bible in the middle, so it's like an overview of the Bible. 10 of the most asked questions that stop people believing the Bible, cause them to doubt the Bible, and then what does it mean to be saved? It's a great witnessing book, and we'll let you have it for an inexpensive price. And then we have this You Choose special where we have, you can put together different combinations of books and DVDs and so on at special prices. If you look there, the green dots, and you can get them at discounted prices. The book One Race, One Blood. I and an African-American pastor, Dr. Charles Ware, wrote that. Deals with what I did today, but much more detail. My son-in-law, Bodie, wrote this book on the Tower of Babel, shows how in different cultures around the world you can see names that go back to Ham, Shem, and Japheth. And then the Answers books. These are the biggest selling creation apologetics books in the world. Every young person, every adult, if you read these 4 books, 120 of the most asked questions that we've been asked in the past 40 years, they're the most asked questions you're likely to get asked to challenge about the Bible. We've answered them in detail. You equip yourselves with them, you'll have those answers. We also have Answers books for kids, middle school and upwards. And then for little kids, because our research indicates they start doubting the Bible at a young age, we have books like A is for Adam, and D is for Dinosaur, N is for Noah, rhyme books, but they're also teaching books if you want to use them that way. Our big book of history from Adam and Eve all the way through, so how all the cultures of the world fit together and go back to Adam and Eve. That one's 15 foot long, and this one's much more detail, and that one's 25 foot long. We have apologetics lessons for kids aged 7 to 12, and we cover all these sorts of topics. My book, The Lie, is really the textbook of this ministry, why it matters, why it's important. It challenges the church. You need to get back and believe the book of Genesis, and that's the foundation for our doctrine, for the gospel, for everything. That's really the message that built the museum and the Ark. That's what it is, that message. And then already gone and ready to return, the two most definitive research projects done on the church, I believe, in this day and age. Why have young people left the church? 2/3 of them have. And why are those left in the church so secular? 40% in the church of 20-year-olds say they're not born again. 2/3 of young people left the church by the time they reach college age. People, this could revolutionize how you teach in your church. It tells you what's happened. We haven't given them answers. We haven't taught them apologetics. And actually, we have a whole set called Ready for Reformation, where we have all the research we've done on the state of the church and colleges and so on. There's a series of books on world religions and cults, The 6 Days in the Age of the Earth, which is a major issue in many churches for many Christian leaders. A book with the entire Nye debate, when I did the debate with Bill Nye, the whole transcript and answering every point that he brought up. And we have a book called Confound the Critics, and put the DVD with it of the debate, and you can get a DVD set. It'll teach you how to defend your faith. Books on dinosaurs, because they're used to convince children and mums and dads the Bible can't be true. This is one of our most popular books on dinosaurs. And then we have the other rhyme books, as I mentioned to you. This is an apologetic series. A lot of churches are using it. It's 6 of my talks done up as 12 30-minute programs, including what I did today, and it has a study guide to go with it. And that teaches you the foundations course from Genesis. And as I said, it includes what I did today, or you can get that as a separate DVD if you want. One blood, one race. We have a 3-year Bible curriculum that thousands of churches are using now. Thousands of churches are using our VBS. You know what's different about our Bible curriculum and VBS? They're apologetics in nature, they're biblical authority based, and they're meaty, not the fluff and stuff we see in a lot of programs these days. This is called Answers Bible Curriculum. It goes chronologically through the Bible. A for apologetics, B, biblical authority, C, chronological through the whole Bible, answering questions as we go, teaching them how to defend their faith, teaching biblical authority, teaching the doctrines, and connecting Old and New Testament. Thousands of churches are using it. Thousands of homeschoolers are using it. And you know what they say? It's revolutionizing what's happening in their churches and homes. At our Answers magazine, last thing to mention to you, it's a leading magazine, one of the leading Christian magazines in the world. It's won many, many awards, just won some new awards recently. And the issue out right now is a special commemorative issue on the Ark. And it even has a magazine in the middle for kids, which you'll find just pulls out. There's a magazine for kids. It's called Kids Answers. And you subscribe, and if you get $75 or more worth of materials, you can actually get a subscription for free. So I'm going to hand over to guest service to make an announcement. I'll be out there in the lobby for half an hour or so if you want to come out and say hi. Those going to the Ark tomorrow, enjoy down the Ark. These two Christian facilities, I believe, can make an incredible impact on the world as we call people back to the authority of God's word and challenge them concerning God's word and the gospel. So I'll hand over for announcements.